Hi, everybody. Today, we're going to discuss Stampli Deep Finance and the shift to abundant intelligence. This is a big moment for finance leaders because you're finally getting a way to quickly and affordably understand everything about your business. The problem has always been that even if you knew what questions to ask, you had to wait for your data and engineering teams to get back to you while wasting their time, or you had to pay for expensive consultants. And by the time you actually got the answers, you already had new questions to ask. But that changes today. Before we get into the big idea around abundant intelligence, let me tell you a little bit about who you'll be hearing from. I'm Josh Constine, the former editor at large for TechCrunch, where I wrote 4,000 articles demystifying the latest technologies and how they would impact our lives. Now I'm a venture partner at SignalFire, a $3 billion early stage venture fund that builds AI in house to help our portfolio companies with recruiting and go to market. And one of those portfolio companies we're so excited about is Stampli, because they are pioneering new ways to give finance teams an edge over their competition. So then I'll talk about a little bit of why cost analysis matters, what changes when finance teams can ask more questions, and what the end of information scarcity means. Then we'll hear from Eyal Feldman, the CEO and co-founder from Stampli, about why their workflow AI actually unlocks the visibility to power this future of finance intelligence. And then Stampli's head of product, Will Lynes, will walk through making it practical. And you can talk through and see which questions Deep Finance can answer for you, your most common, your most critical questions, and how they can help you find ways to save money and move faster. So here's the path for our session. I'm going to talk through the end of intelligence scarcity and what that means for you. We'll talk about why deep finance isn't just another dashboard, and then you'll see how iteratively prompting deep finance can let you dig into any facet of your business. And we'll close by talking through the right trust model, how deep finance can surface useful signals while you and the team retain the ability to make that final accounting judgment. So, the reason this matters starts with a familiar constraint. Finance teams don't lack curiosity. They lack enough time, analyst capacity, and clean reporting paths to actually chase the useful questions that come up every week. So, for a serious question, somebody usually has to scope it, find the right data, build the analysis, check the output, and turn it into a presentation that business can actually use. And dashboards can help with these questions, but they were designed to answer a specific question at the surface level. Meanwhile, consultants and one-off analysis can help, but they're often too slow and expensive to use frequently. And by the time the work is done, you already have follow-up questions or the entire state of play has changed. So teams end up rationing their curiosity. They ask questions that are clearly worth the effort and leave everything else unasked. But there's a better way. So, what happens when intelligence scarcity becomes abundance? That means finance teams stop reserving intelligence only for their highest priority questions. And instead, they get reviewable analysis of anything they want. So a wider range of useful questions become worth asking. That's how deep finance fills the gaps between your data and what you understand. Because deep finance uses finance, invoice, and AP workflow data that's already available in Stampli to create focused analysis that leaders can review, validate, and use for follow-ups. It's not a static dashboard, and it's not the final word on the accounting judgment. It's a way to give the right information to the right people so they can make the right call. So Eyal and Will are going to walk through what makes deep finance different and the kind of finance questions it's designed to help teams explore, and why the right expectation is signal intelligence, useful direction that finance teams can use to inspect, challenge, and act on their data. I can't wait to see how abundant intelligence gives you new ways to predict the future and design it. So now I'll pass it to Eyal to share why the Stampli day-to-day workflow automation AI lays the foundation for a more strategic approach to finance.
Hi, everybody. So great to be here and to meet you all. Very excited always to talk to our customers, actually using and working with Stampli every day. So this is really a pleasure for me to be here with you today. I want to start by taking you a little bit back to what you all very familiar with. Whenever you have a question in your business, and you need it answered, and there is no dashboard that already answers that question. You have to go, you have to find time for the analyst in your organization or a consultant you work with to kind of understand your question. Then they go and then they translate this into requirements. They have to go and find the data sources, build ETLs, which is the method by which they extract the data. They build some kind of a cube, and then they allow you to either see a dashboard on the cube or whatever this cube allows you to do, some advanced into allowing some natural language over a cube, but it's always very limited. It's always very limited to what was designed. And then 2 months later, 3 months later, you get to see the report, and it's not exactly what you wanted. You wanted actually something a little different, because once you visualize it, you think differently about it. And then the cycle goes on, and it takes so long time that you basically start to stop asking questions. You pace your questions, right? You think like, that's question going to take so much time from the team to check. So, I'll just skip it. There are all these other things that are more important for me that I already asked them to do. And this is really important to understand, that deep finance is basically changing this equation completely. Deep finance is not about having a natural language ability to ask questions over a pre-designed cube. In essence, what's happening here is that this analyst that listen to you is an AI analyst. They break down your question, then they deploy an army of AI engineers that basically write code, go to all the data sources, so there is no ETL, there is no cube, and then they build the world of data needed for the analysis of the question that you asked. And then they analyze it. If they need to go, they write more code, go more to these data sources, come back, and then craft for you a nice presentation that answers your question and give you insights that you even didn't think about. And it's really important to understand this difference. The reason that we're having this webinar is because it's a little bit like the moment when ChatGPT arrived to the market, if you remember, where most people were skeptical, right? They said, it's kind of like Siri, and it's not going to understand what I'm saying, and it's going to be very limited. And then you realize that it's actually something different. Same here. On the surface, many different types of reporting may look the same, but they're very limited. Here, this ability of this AI analyst to go, to write code, to retrieve the information is a superpower that just didn't exist before, and also doesn't exist in most cases. You don't see that yet. It's a real agentic analysis of your data. So you can move to the next slide. All right. So let's take a moment. Let's take a moment back and kind of put things in context. When I think about Stampli, I look at three elements. We've got the procure to pay process, which is extremely flexible with a lot of options to customize it, yet standardized in one system. What I mean by that is that we're not taking any requirement that you come up with and go back and write code in order to fulfill this requirement. We build all the flexibility within the system. Why is that so important? It's important because, one, you need the flexibility because you have sophisticated processes and because you're going to change your processes. Second, it's important because we applied AI in a very unique way that sits on every element of your process and learns you. And this goes to the second point, which is Billy's ability to basically take anything that is happening there without any more having humans or data scientists involved, and allow them to basically understand what you're doing and take that work away from you. We today support basically any field that you key. And what's really unique about it, that there is no human that sits behind it and learns it anymore. Stampli is doing AI before AI was cool. And what we've done with all our team of data scientists is that they built a replica of themselves that can sit on every element in the system. And basically, the system keeps on learning you. And once it understands and it runs in shadow mode and it says, I can do that on behalf of you, it does it on behalf of you. Now, why this is so important? Because big part of what finance is doing is capture. And this allows you to capture faster, more efficiently, focus more on the things that require business decision and not things that are recurring. And the third element is this intelligence layer. The intelligence layer is more, it's not about how you capture the data, it's about what you do with the data. So what is deep finance? Deep finance basically allows you to ask any question, and then it conducts this custom analysis, this analysis, this code that is built on many different sources of data. And will show you what are the sources of data, because it's extremely important to understand where it can look in order to know what questions you can ask. What's most interesting about it is that it doesn't only look at structured data. Structured data is data that we save in a database, which is the easiest one for, to kind of code and retrieve and analyze. But in addition to that, it looks at unstructured data. What is unstructured data? Unstructured data is every word and every letter in every invoice that you have. Think about it. You only capture GLs, but there are all the line items and prices and quantities. They're all there. Deep Finance knows how to look into all of this. Same thing with your contracts. If you upload your contracts to the vendor, it's able to basically read the contract, understand the contract, and compare that to invoices, even things you never coded on these invoices. So really important to understand what it really does in order to understand what you can do with it and how you can basically interact with it. And what it surfaces for you, it always takes your question and it basically try not only to answer your question, but also to surface patterns, risks, and opportunities. And it's really magical when you see the outcome, when you start to connect all this data that is otherwise very, very hard to connect and will be extremely time consuming. So basically, what you really want to do is to start with asking a question. Think about the data sources that are there, and Will is going to walk you through this, and then think about the question and let your imagination go and start playing with it. For me personally, this became a game changer in even simple questions. I wanted to know something strategic about cash opportunities, but I also wanted to know something very tactical about a certain vendor where I wanted to understand what happened with the interaction with that vendor in terms of, changing of pricing over the time, spend, opportunities for negotiation before we going to negotiate renewal. I'm no longer waiting for anybody to go and to work for a week to get me these answers. I've just asked the question, I get it. And the way to think about it, this is signal. You always may want to go and check further and go to the exact details, but as executives, we look for signal, and this is an amazing way to find the signals. I will share with you that in Stampli, we're so excited about this that internally, we basically connected to Deep Finance almost all of our systems. So today I can basically ask any question and I can get an answer for in Stampli. It's connected to our CRM, it's connected to our other systems. And it just basically became like I have this analyst sitting nearby me, and it's like the Oracle. They can answer any question that I have. And this is really, really amazing, cutting edge technology. So I hope you enjoy it and benefit from it. And I invite Will to take it from here.
Thanks, Eyal. So again, Will Lynes, I lead up our AI product team. So excited to get into more of the details of how this works and some of the ways you can use it. So as Eyal mentioned, it all starts from the question. And for me, the way my mind works, it helps to understand what data is available to Deep Finance to answer your questions. And it can all be encapsulated as any data you have in Stampli can be analyzed by Deep Finance. So the one I want to call out specifically, because I think it's maybe less obvious than the others, is as Eyal mentioned, the invoice contents, specifically line items, service dates, things that the AP team might not have coded on the left side of the invoice page, but is there in the original document. Deep Finance can actually do analyses based on that. Similarly, with vendor documents, it can look in the details of your contracts, your pricing agreements, other documentation you have on file with the vendor, as well as all the other things you would expect, the structured invoice data, the audit trail, and the data from procurement, direct pay, and Stampli Card. And as Eyal mentioned, these data are not, Deep Finance looks at them holistically and sees connections between them and how together they can give a more comprehensive, insightful answer. It's not like artificially siloed. So to walk through a couple examples, a question a finance leader might ask is, where are we being overcharged and how much should we seek in refunds or credits? So, some of the data needed to answer that question is in the invoice, both the line items on the invoice PDF itself, the invoice amount, because what was indicated on the invoice PDF isn't always what ends up coded and paid. So both of those data sources, and then the vendor documents where you have a contract or pricing agreement to compare against. Another example of a question you might ask, how are delays in the invoice coding and approvals, basically like the parts of the process that the AP team owns, how are those delays affecting our ability to send payments on time? So Deep Finance might bring in the invoice data, the audit trail to see what questions and answers happened on the invoice, what context or documentation was missing that might have added delays to the process. And then ultimately from direct pay, timing of when was the invoice approved to be paid, when was the payment approved to be sent, and finally sent to the vendor to assemble a more complete picture of what happened with those late payments. I think Eyal gave a good overview of this, but just to break it down again, you ask your question, and this can be as sort of short and messy as it comes out of your brain. One of the things that's really amazed me in the time since this launched is to see, as we've been using Deep Finance within Stampli on our own data, to see how much it can do with a relatively short 1 or 2 line question. It looks at the sort of the context and the intention behind the question. What are you trying to achieve? And then it analyzes what data sources does it have access to that would be relevant to answering that question. By the way, if it sees that your question is one that's outside the scope of data you're tracking in Stampli, it'll tell you that. But generally, if you're asking about something that is in Stampli, it'll go off and do the analysis. Finally, once it has built its initial report, it goes over, inspects the outputs, validates that the charts and the tables look right, make sense, are internally consistent, and are presented in a digestible way. And then you can review that report to make smarter, more informed decisions. Okay, let's get into some more detailed examples here. For example, an analysis of vendors, you might ask, what's our engagement with this particular SaaS vendor looking like? I want to understand the value it's bringing us, the costs. The example you see on the right is based on a real run of Deep Finance, and the prompt we gave it was not a lot smarter than what you see here. So I think this is a great example of how creative it is and smart it is in choosing the right data and analyzing it in a way that is actionable. So to call out some specific things here, excuse me, jump to slide. It's not just sort of categorizing your prompt and like building from some set of templates about different kinds of analyses. Each one is bespoke, created on the fly, and basically reflects the shape of the data it finds. So in this case, the invoices referenced seat counts and seats being added, seats being removed, line items that reflected proration. Deep Finance saw all that and built some analysis. One of the pages in the analysis was about this, and it's coming to a recommendation that the customer adjust their base number of seats that are in the contract versus just a la carte added seats, because those are priced at a lower per seat rate than the ones that are added a la carte. And to do this, it looked at both the vendor's contract saved in Stampli as well as the invoice line items themselves. Another analysis or question you might ask for is, where can we save some money on payments? Are we paying too early? Are we paying late? So for this, it would look at both the payment data and invoice data. And here it looked at how long does it typically take to pay vendors, and saw a pretty strong pattern of vendors who are on net 30 terms, but the organization is paying many of those vendors early. Sometimes well before the 30-day deadline. And so it's highlighting if those net 30 terms were 2% 10, so you get a discount when you pay within 10 days after the invoice date. Here's how much the discount, and it's picking the vendors with the highest spend. And it's also showing here's the baseline of how quickly you're paying the vendor. So in this case, vendor 25, you're not paying them within 10 days, it's 18. But if you could accelerate, and if the vendor will agree to 2% 10 terms, then this is the discount you could earn. Last example I want to show, looking at invoice details. So related to the example I showed earlier or discussed earlier, comparing the vendor contracts with the invoice line items and prices paid there. It's gone over all the vendors who have contracts in Stampli and validating where what's been invoiced is consistent with the contract. So the annual invoice matched the order form precisely. And it even broke down what are some of the details it looked at, the number of seats, the price per seat. Another example here, invoiced on a quarterly cadence for an annual total of $75,000, again, aligned with the contract. It also dutifully did what we asked it to do and looked for cases where there were discrepancies. Generally, these were small and not that meaningful, but it wanted to make sure it gave a comprehensive answer to the question. So here we can see one of the cases, the invoiced amounts were below the contract. Another case where the final invoice for the engagement came late. So relatively small discrepancies, no major concerns, but giving a very comprehensive answer here. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Eyal to wrap us up and transition us to Q&A.
Sorry, I was muted. So basically, thank you, Will, for your presentation. Basically, what we want you to get out of here with is understanding that you can ask any question. It could be a tactical question, something very simple. I want to know what happened with that vendor. What's our engagement looking like? I need to prepare to renegotiate, or something cross-system that you want to understand. And the more strategic things, I want to have these strategic insights. Now, it's really very similar to how you learn to work with AI, which in essence have a lot of similarity to how you work with people. And I will also address with that the first question that I saw that someone asked, which is how can we know we can trust the data? It's the way we look at it. We separate the world into two parts. There is precision and there is signal. And when we think about accounts payable and we think about the solution we provide you in terms of capture, it's extremely important for us to be 100% precise and to have you review what we're not sure about to make sure that the captured information is accurate to the cent, because at the end of the day, this is your job as finance. And eventually you can go and drill down and understand things from there. When we're looking at a report like Deep Finance, we call it signal. Why we call it signal? Because the question is very legit. How can I trust it? The reasons that you should always apply critical thinking to what you're seeing is because, one, the answer depends on the quality of the question that was asked. So, it could be the same thing. You would ask an analyst a question, but you will be vague and you will get an answer the way they understood the question. So it's always important to apply this critical thinking. You can then create another prompt with being more specific about how you want to connect two elements or stuff like that. So really, really important to understand that what you're looking at, first, you will get better and better at querying it. I will say that it's really, really impressively good in what it does, but critical thinking is really important here. The ability, the more context you will give it or the more specific you will be, the more accurate it will eventually be. But you should always treat it as signal. And if you got a signal that is interesting, you can always dig in and actually validate it. Some things require validation, some things don't. It's enough to have a signal. But this is really an amazing superpower to have for execs to get the directional signal that they want and see what they want to do with it.
Amazing. So I hope you guys all leave this with a new, more curious mindset. And I think we really just got a preview of what the future of all business intelligence looks like. So thank you so much to Will and Eyal for sharing this with us, for the whole Stampli team for putting all their hard work and effort into this. And thank you to every single one of you. I know you've got a lot of things on your plate today. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us. And we can't wait to see what you learn with Deep Finance. Thanks so much from us at Stampli. See you soon.